Hello, chess family. It's me, National Master Jesse James, and it's time again for another segment of my personal games. Now, this one is a little bit old as far as, well, me playing it recently, but it's still a very nice game. And this one I'm going to be playing against Evan Zhang, a very strong scholastic player here in San Antonio. I believe he's around 1800 now, and I'm pretty sure he'll be getting to 1900, 2000 pretty soon. With that being said, he loves to play the London system, so I'm playing the black side. Let's see how it goes. We start off with d4, knight f6, bishop f4. There we go. There's London. Pawn g6. I saw a really cool idea, at least a new way of playing against the London system was actually to play the King's Indian defense. I think there's even a video with James Canty talking about this, which is really cool. I actually found a really cool idea against this. Let's see if you guys like it. We continue with knight f3, bishop g7, pawn e3, pawn d6, h3. Now this move was played after one game against Evan. He played this the regular knight to d2, and I played bishop g4 and traded off. And I guess he didn't like that because from now on he's always added in this move now of pawn h3. Bishop g4 is just an interesting way to play. This bishop typically in a lot of d4 openings is just bad, so if you can trade this guy off, yeah, it doesn't really hurt your position at all. And especially in King's Indian defense, with your pawns all in the dark squares, the knights can move around. The light square bishop, again, just has a hard time. So trading it off is not bad at all. I went ahead and castled. Knight bd2, pawn c5, and pawn c3. And this is one of the ideas. I'm just going to be attacking the center. And, well, the d4 is the strong point, so I want to try and hit it with c5 and maybe in the future even e5. Now, if you play the London system or you know anything about it, you know that the most important square that white's trying to control is the e5 square. That's why the King's Indian defense for black is so good against it. Good meaning double-edged, right? Because what's black's main idea in the King's Indian defense? Controlling the e5 square also. So whoever wins this battle over e5 will typically get the advantage. With that being said, I believe the best move for white here is actually to play d takes c5. Unfortunately, he did not do that, and it allows me to keep pressing. So pawn c3 was played, knight c6, and again, I'm trying to get control over this e5 square. And, well, d5 can't get played as long as the queen is being blocked, as my knight is guarding this one. Alright, bishop e2, rook e8, and here there's really going to be no good way to stop my e5 from coming through. The London system is a very good opening if your opponent is playing the d5 idea. Don't get me wrong, white always is going to get an even game, but I will tell you particularly, d4, d5 London systems makes the game a lot easier because, again, we're not contesting or fighting over e5. Here, as long as the pawn stays on d6, I have control over e5 here, and, well, I'm going to be playing e5 pretty soon here. White went ahead and castled, and, well, this is the idea, right? We want to go ahead and control the center, so I went ahead and played pawn to e5. Pawn takes, and bishop g3. I'm very happy with my position now, although the computer is saying it is about equal in this position. With that being said, one of the reasons why I like this is because I have lots of control of the center. I've been able to control the e5 square. With that being said, can you see one of my weakest squares right now for white? I mean for black right here? Computer's giving me a little bit better. One of the weak squares that I have right now is this d6 square. I'm going to be playing e4 in the future, but I have to do this just right because, well, you have to be careful with knight c4 ideas. The d6 square will become weak, and this can be a very good outpost for Evan. Well, let's go ahead and prepare this a little bit more. I went ahead and played queen to e7. The idea is I want to get the bishop out, but again, I'm really worried about this d6 square. So by moving the queen out the way, I'm going to be allowing my rook to go over to d8. And I believe this is where the rook belongs anyways. The rook doesn't do too much on this file anyway, since, well, there's just a pawn in the way now. All right, we continue. Queen to c2. Again, I don't know if this was the best move, but it is a way to play here. There was other ideas if you're thinking about trying to play something like pawn to e4 here. With that being said, I wasn't too worried about this, as e4 does create this weak dark square over here. I already have ideas like knight h5 and maybe even knight f4. And, yeah, my bishop will get into the game. Not too bad here. That being said, he just went ahead and played queen c2, and now I can start pushing for the advantage. Here we go. Let's grab the extra space. Pawn to e4. And, well, where do you move this knight to? Do you go to h2 or do you go to e1? I definitely believe that Evan chose the wrong square here. Which one do we go to? Well, hopefully you chose the right one. I believe it was going to be knight to h2, knight g4. It seems a bit weird, but I mean, well, in the game, Evan does play the knight to e1, and where's the knight going next? This was a big problem for him. And notice it's really hard to ever try and push your f pawn, because in most of these kind of positions, what happens is, well, we're just gonna take, and now the e pawn becomes backwards. In the game, I went ahead and played rook to d8, just putting my rook on a good file. But again, if he goes ahead, he played rook to e1. If he tries to play something like f3 or even f4, he's trying to open the position. This pawn becomes weak, so I can just go ahead and take here, and I'll have a good game because the pawn's weak. Yes, rook takes f3 can get played to hold it, but the game is just going to get harder and harder for him. All right, in the game, he went ahead and played rook to d1, and you can see that these pieces are all just mangled over here, and they really have a hard time getting out. Well, what's the next piece I want to get into the game? It's the bishop, right? Where's the best place for my bishop to move to? Should I just go ahead and play something like bishop e6, bishop f5, or maybe even go pawn b6, bishop b7 ideas? All right, hopefully you came up with some ideas here. Remember, you're more than welcome to push pause and try to figure out the best moves or the best plans that you think are going to happen. Here, after a while, I went ahead and just played pawn b6. Computer definitely does not like this move. With that being said, I like it. This idea is just going to be defending this pawn, which I saw in some variations, this pawn can become weak. Again, you have to be careful with these knight c4 variations. And that's actually what happens here. He plays knight to c4, seeing that he has control over d6. But I had a move in mind for this. I went ahead and played bishop to a6. And this was the idea of playing b6 because I saw that knight to c4 was coming. Well, I'm more than happy to trade off this bishop because, well, the weakest square for white right now is this d3 square. And one of its main defenders is this bishop right here. All right, let's keep moving forward. The knight went to d6, and here, although it looks pretty good, the knight just can't be maintained. And so, well, simple chess. Let's go ahead and trade off the bishops first. Queen takes, and now let's kick this knight out of here. A nice move here, knight to e5. And, well, white's all but forced to go ahead and trade the bishop off. If you don't, the knight's going to be staring at this square for a long time. And, well, yeah, this knight is just going to be one of the best pieces on the board. It's really hard for black. It'll be really hard for white to try and hold this position. The rooks can be traded off. And, again, this knight is just kind of imprisoned here. In fact, this knight becomes one of the biggest problems for Evan in this game. Yeah, I don't believe knight c4 is a good idea at all, so because, you know, you're just losing a piece here. Rook takes on d1. Oof. Yeah, at least not the piece that you're wanting to lose. Here I'm just going to be winning the exchange. All right, so the game continues with bishop takes, queen takes. Now that I got the dark square bishop, I feel very, very confident in this position. The knight went back to c4. Queen to e6, a nice little move here that puts pressure on the knight, but the real idea is putting pressure on this a2 pawn that's undefended. Always be looking for undefended pieces. You can help keep maintaining pressure by finding where weaknesses are and just attacking them. It's really that simple. Well, queen e6 gets played, and now, well, it's becoming harder and harder for Evan in this game. Knight c2, connecting the rooks just in case the trade's going to happen. And here I went ahead and played pawn b5, just slowly pushing back my opponent. Knight 4a3, and now I like this move, pawn to a6. Yes, there are ideas about c4, maybe looking for b4, but with this strong move of a6, what's this do? Well, look at the knights. They can't move anywhere. If you do play something like, let's say, pawn c4, well, we couldn't play it right now, but we won't play it later. You give access to d4 and b4 here. So we're just going to maintain this pawn structure to try and kill these knights. Again, if you want to try and go pawn grabbing with something like queen takes a2, it's not to be recommended because, well, the crazier things get whenever you're in a better position, it only makes things worse. Because remember, complications lead to mistakes, and you don't want to make any mistakes. Right now, you have a clean advantage. Try to restrain and maintain. That's what I like to say. Just you have a better position. Don't go into crazy variations. Pawn a6, lock them down, and try to hold them down. I guess I'll have a lot of different rhymes with trying to maintain these kind of positions. All right, well, Evan went ahead and traded, and then played rook d1. And this is very common play with him. He's trading off all pieces because he's trying to play for a draw. Now, if you're trying to actually play for a draw, funny enough, you should not be trying to trade off all pieces just as fast as possible. You should try to better your position as much as possible. Remember, think about it. When you're trying to win a chess game, there has to be an imbalance, right? Well, the more that you try to keep the balance, your opponent's going to keep trying to push for a win. So they're to keep moving up while you just keep maintaining. So this other person is making their position slightly better. You're just maintaining. You're actually getting into a worse position. So the best way to play for a draw is actually to play for a win, meaning you keep trying to elevate your position, you keep trying to make it better. That will maintain the equality. Hopefully that makes sense. Always remember, guys, you're always more than welcome to send questions to me. All right, well, excuse me. I can't really move this rook away because then his rook will control the only open file. With that in mind, I came up with a nice idea here. My knight wants to get to this d3 square, so I did a little problem solving here on how to get it there. Do you see how I did that? Well, you don't want to go knight d7 first because, well, you just put yourself into a pin. A very bad idea. With that being said, I asked Evan, I said, hey, can you help me get my knight there? And he said yes, thankfully enough. Of course, I really didn't ask him that, but I played rook to d7, knowing that most likely he would go ahead and take, and I can take back with my knight, and now you see I have access to e5 and to d3. I love this game because, well, although it's an end game and it may seem boring, well, it seems like it may be even, black has a huge advantage here with already -3. And it's really cool because, well, nothing really looks like it's different, right? I mean, the pieces are all the same. The pawns are just on the board. But to the trained eye, this is an easily winning position. I control so much space, and my pieces are going to the right area. All right, queen d2 got played, and I played knight to e5. Here he can, he can go for a check over here, but it won't really help out too much. He went ahead and played the best move, which is pawn to b3, stopping me from taking the a2 pawn. Again, in some of these other variations, you just don't have time to take the a2 pawn, because then your opponent gets active. So queen d2, knight e5. Now taking an a2 could be an idea. So he played pawn to b3. And here I didn't want him to jump into d8, so just simple chess, bishop f6. I'm just controlling everything, and in fact, there's really no square that he can come into my position now. Again, I'm just holding him down, and I'm trying to build my position. All right, knight b1. This knight is begging to do something, and well, I'm not going to be letting the knight go anywhere. And these pawns over here are definitely weak, and you can see how my pieces are slowly inching forward to put pressure on them. Again, I take my time here. I went ahead and just played king g7. No more checking ideas, and my king is safe from all these kind of ideas coming in. He played knight to e1. Again, I don't know where the knight's going. Maybe he was planning something like pawn to f4. With that being said, black to move. What is the best move here? I really like this move because, again, I'm going to be creating my first target where I'm just going to be adding on lots of pressure. All right, hopefully you push pause. Hopefully you're trying to find it. What was the best move here for black? Here, believe it or not, it's pawn to c4. Here is the perfect time to go ahead and play c4. Now, I mentioned earlier, hey, what about knight c2 and knight d4? Well, things are a little bit different now. By playing the pawn to c4 here, I'm actually threatening to take a pawn and win it. Okay, so that's just a free pawn right there. And, well, they don't want to take over here because then, well, if pawn takes, you can see how beautiful the knight taking will be, or even the queen taking will be. But here, this was the point. The c3 pawn is actually my target. You see the bishop's already eyeing it, and, well, if the queen takes, it'll be eyeing c3 and on a2, and these knights, again, are just held down, and they're trying to defend this position. Okay, so how do I defend the pawn? He went ahead and played queen c2, which I was more than happy to see because, well, he is attacking over here on e4. He is defending on b3, but now, well, look at this beautiful knight. The knight jumps in, and the knight is definitely the best piece on the board, dominating. Of course, he's more than welcome to trade here, and unfortunately for him, he went ahead and did it because, well, the knight is the best piece on the board, and, well, we're going to take back and create a passed pawn. All right, which way should we take back? Both of them are good, but one is definitely better than the other one. Which one was it? Should I take back with the e pawn or take back with the c pawn? Well, hopefully you found it. Believe it or not, I'm going to be taking back with the e pawn. Taking back with the c pawn is not a bad idea, but I will say you have to be careful about the c pawn becoming a passed pawn at some point. With that being said, when you take back with the e pawn, you gain some extra squares over here, and also you can definitely see it's 4 pawns versus the 3. Very, very good to have a pawn majority. This game is all about attacking on the queen side now that I've actually broken through. Already here, the computer's giving this -5, meaning I'm up basically a rook. As long as I keep playing well, I should be able to win this game. All right, queen d1 was played. You can see this knight is just going to be stuck here for the rest of the game because it has to defend the c3 pawn. Queen to f5. Well, simple idea. I would love to try and play ideas about trying to get the pawn forward. For instance, there's already a tactical idea about playing something like pawn to b4. And if they take, well, maybe I can take back. This doesn't work because the pawn on d3 will be hanging. So, simple chess. I went ahead and played queen to f5 with the idea of playing b4 in the future. A very, very hard idea. And again, the knight's pretty much stalemated. This queen's having a hard time. Oof, very tough position here. Takes, queen to a4. One of the most active ways to play. With that being said, this is almost basically a position where you can just figure it out. It's basically a puzzle here. Black to move. There's a lot of different winning ideas here. Let's see if you can come up with one of them. All right, hopefully you found an idea. One of the ideas here is just to go into a good endgame. So I went ahead and played queen to b5, one of the best moves in the position. And well, this is one of those moves that you really can't refuse. For instance, if you, well, with the queen's attacking both the queen and also the knight, there's only one queen move you can really play to not trade queens, and that'd be queen d1. And then after something like queen b2, you see the game's pretty much over. As well, we have pressure on a2, and well, c3 is probably going to fall. This knight can't move anywhere because c3 will fall again. So this pretty much forces the endgame, which I already had calculated was going to be an easy win. So queen takes, pawn takes, and again, I still have ideas like pawn to b4 here, so I can get c3 going, and I can get these connected pass pawns running. Well, he played one of the best moves here, the most challenging one, king f1. If the king gets over here, maybe the game is going to be a little bit hard. Knight a3, and then knight takes b5. Again, I already had calculated this endgame before I went into it, which always recommended. Don't just play blindly, calculate ahead. And, well, black to move and win. What do we play? I finally get to put my idea in. Pawn to b4, and there's just no way to stop one of these pawns from getting across. He did play the best line. C takes b4. Pawn c3, knight takes c3. This was the best he can do, or else one of the pawns will be queening. So he played knight takes c3, bishop takes c3, and this was the hope. Well, he has two connected pass pawns over here. Maybe this can be good enough, and if the king gets close enough, he can win a pawn. Hey, is this such an easy winning position? Well, again, I was able to calculate this. I saw that this pawn was going to become weak pretty soon. Best move for him was to play pawn to b5, which is what he did. But after the simple bishop a5, this bishop has now stopped both pawns. So at this point, the bishop does a great job at stopping the king from getting closer to the d3 pawn. And I'm also going ahead and stopping these two pass pawns. Here, best was just to go ahead and play e4. Maybe even b6 is interesting. But he went ahead and played f4, and now the game is pretty easy to win. f4 was the idea of going e4, king f2, king e3. Not a bad idea. Unfortunately, he was not thinking of my move, and well, black to move. What's the best move here for me? I'm going to kill this counterplay. I'm going to get my king over here. Once my king gets over to the center to help escort the pawn, I'll just win these pawns, or I'll push this pawn across the board. Let's stalemate this pawn structure. I went ahead and played pawn f5. And now the game is pretty easy. I can just walk my king over here leisurely. g4 got played. Let's not mess up the pawn structure. Of course, pawn takes will make things a little bit harder because, you got some passed pawns over here to deal with. Again, this is winning, but best technique, let's just get the king into the game. King f7, king f2, king e6, king f3, and king to d5. Now e4 cannot get played. And again, if I need to, I have an extra bishop over here. I can just kind of move it back and forth to get off tempo. Because, well, what does white do here? In the game, he went ahead and just played e4 check. It doesn't really matter. If you just try to hold strong here with, let's say, pawn g5, you could play something like king c4, or again, just kind of wait around. Bishop b6, and white will be in zugzwang at some point. You don't want to allow the king, this king to get to e4, because e3 will fall at some point. So white can try to make some moves here. e4, bishop a5, h4, bishop b6, and again, stalemated. The king finally moves, and king e4, and everything falls. If everything falls very nicely too. Again, you can also win this position by just marching your king over here and winning these pawns. In the game, he kind of just played for some kind of tricks. He played e4 check, pawn takes, king e3, and very simple chess now. Bishop b6 check, king d2, king to d4. Now these pawns are going to run. f5, check, check, and then check. And at this point, he went ahead and just resigned, as I'll be making my new queen, and checkmate is only a few moves away. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. This was a very nice game playing against the London system, against Evan Zhang, one of our top scholastic players. Very strong player. I'm pretty sure he'll be making, like I said, 1900, 2000. This game, I was able to get control of the e5 square, which is the contested square that the London players are trying to play for. With the King's Indian, we fight for it immediately. I highly recommend you try it out if you are King's Indian players, to try the King's Indian versus the London system. That being said, hope you guys enjoyed the game. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.